Hello, I'm Ramloti, and I'm here in Kamalaya with Karku and Jamna and Raghuvir, and so grateful to be hearing some of their stories about Babaji. So we're going to begin by, I'm just going to ask, how were you called, or how did you first find out about Babaji?
I heard about Babaji when I was living in Amsterdam, and the stories I heard were all not true, I found out later, but somehow they were intriguing. He could transform in a ball of fire and fly away into the sky, and he had cobras at his command. And well, that sounds interesting, but I was not at all actually spiritually oriented. It was just starting a little bit. And I was going through a whole process in my life, and I wanted to go to live in the Fiji Islands. But before going there, I thought I'll travel again a little bit to India, where I'd been before. And I didn't go to India with that purpose of meeting Babaji, really. And I went to Nepal, and there I had a spiritual awakening somehow. It was more around Christ, but I didn't take it personal with Christianity. And I thought but I started to look for something, but I didn't know what. Now, somebody had given me the book from Babaji, which Malti has written, but it was in German, and I can actually read German, but I never did. I was carrying this book in my backpack, but after this moment, I thought I'm going to meet him. Actually, I was doubting between Osho and Babaji, but this picture, this look from Babaji was somehow calling me. And then I went there. If I have to go into the particulars, we'll be sitting here for an hour.
I had a similar story in the beginning, in that I was 20 years old and I was at university at Princeton. And at the time, I had a very strong interest in Zen Buddhism. And my aesthetic, I was in the architecture department at that time, and my aesthetic was sort of very simple and clean lines, and very natural and uncluttered. And my practice was Zen Buddhism. And I didn't have an interest at the time in India, and I actually had a negative mindset about gurus, because at the time, 20 years old, you really think you know it and have figured it all out. And for me, the idea was that the journey was an inward journey, and finding that divinity and that essence within. So the whole idea of an outer guru, the way I had heard about it, was just something I was not called to or interested in, and would often argue, that with friends. So, but I was interested in meditation and in pranayama and even yoga from a non-Indian context. So I went on a retreat in which the very first night of the gathering, which was a week-long gathering, off to the side against some books was a picture, about an 8x11 image of face. And at the very first break, I just felt compelled, like really drawn to have a closer look at this image. And as I approached, I was riveted, and I could not take my eyes off the image of this man. And I wept, and I wept unconsolably. It was as if my soul, my being, had been deeply touched in a way that I didn't even know I was longing for. And a part of me, my mind, was a little bit observing the situation and wondering what the heck is going on here as I was having this experience. And immediately, as I settled down, I went to speak to the facilitator of this retreat and ask, who is this? And that's when I found out that it was Babaji, and that people could go see him in India. And I remember the second question out of my mouth was, can people go see him? And she said yes. And I think it was 6 months later, I took a leave from Princeton so that I could go and meet him. So I really felt called. It was not something I was hunting or seeking. Yeah.
You don't want to tell about meeting him?
in another moment.
My story is a little longer. I'm from Canada, but I graduated from school in Grass Valley, Nevada City, in California. And I graduated a couple of years earlier than my classmates. I kind of skipped ahead in school. We had a graduation party in the countryside, like a be-in, like a concert. And there were bands, and it was in the forest, just outside of Auburn, California. And several of my classmates had been drafted, and they were on their way to Vietnam, and that's why it was such a big party. And I got to this party. I was with my sister and her boyfriend, and we were in the forest. And out of the forest, I saw this Indian guy. I had no contact or really understanding about India up until that point in my life, and I made a joke. I said, "Hey, Santa Claus, you're 6 months early." He had a long white hair and a long beard. It was kurta and pajamas. And he said, "I came to see you." And we got into a conversation. And we walked off into the forest. We walked up on a hill and we looked down at the party. And he told me about Babaji. And he told me that Babaji was my guru and that he had come to call me. And then I had to leave my home and go to India. And we spent the entire night until the sun rose the next day. And he gave me my first teachings. We walked through the night when the music was ended and it was all campfires and people sitting around their campfires. We walked around from campfire to campfire, and he started teaching me about bubbles of consciousness and how everybody lives in a bubble. And there was a comet passing at that time, quite a famous comet. I can't remember the name now. This was June of 1970. This was the month Babaji appeared in Haidakhan. And it looked like the tail of the comet. It was really visible, and it looked like there was a daylight coming to another universe. It was just this mind-blowing experience. And in the morning, we found my sister and her boyfriend, and told them we said goodbye to this guy, and I told him, I was leaving for India. I was going to take off and go to India. I was 16. And I went home, packed a little bag. My father came and got really angry. Why wasn't I at work? And we had a fight. I told him I was leaving for India. He told me I was an idiot and I'd be home in 2 days. And off I went to find Baba. I didn't go to India for 6 years. 6 years later, I actually got to Haidakhan. And I was living in Germany at the time. I had gone to so many ashrams, so many gurus, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Sufi. I went to everybody, everything, always looking, my way to get to Babaji. I bought a bicycle, I started training, I rode around Europe thinking I would ride my bicycle to India. I had all these plans. I learned how to be a pure vegetarian and eat only raw food, always training and preparing. And then one day my son was born along that road. And a friend of mine brought my son and his mother from England to Germany, where I was living, and at the time, in 1976, and said, "I think I met the Baba that you're looking for." He had dropped them off and he had gone to Cologne, and he met Malti in Cologne and had attended some talk about Babaji. I'll never forget this. I was sitting on the floor, my son was playing in my lap, and he said, "I think I met the guru that you're always talking about, the guru that you're looking for." And he handed me this little tiny picture, just a little square picture of Babaji. And I left my body. My body I was up on the ceiling looking down, and my body was convulsing. My son was thrown out of my lap. His mother was coming to grab the baby. And my friend was going, "Wow, if you need some money for a ticket, I'll buy you a ticket." And a couple of weeks later, I was in Delhi. I had the the address of the Hanuman Mandir on Baba Karak Singh Marg. I went to the Hanuman Mandir. I met the Mahant. You remember Mahantji. And there was pictures of Babaji everywhere, and it was like, wow, it's real, it's real. And he said, well, if you're going to go all the way to meet Babaji, you need all these things. And they sent me with their son to Old Delhi and bought a lota and a lungi and, got a flashlight and all the things I would need. And they put me on a night bus with a note in Hindi to Muniraji. He said, when you arrive at this town, Haldwani, in the morning, you just show this to a rickshaw driver and they'll take you to Muniraji's house. There's so many stories. I can tell a million stories about this journey and everything. But anyway, in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, I arrived in Haldwani. Rickshaw drivers all running, yelling, trying to get your business. One of them took me to Muniraji's house. I was standing out on the street and Muniraji came and looked over the balcony. And somebody came and opened the door. And I went upstairs to see, I went up the stairs and Muniraji said, sleep. And I laid down on this bench. I didn't know it then, but Muniraji had gone to do his puja. He was ready. I was in the temple and I had disturbed his puja. So I laid down. I fell right to sleep on this hard bench. And after some time, Muniraji came, said, drink. He gave me a glass of milk. I had a glass of milk, a cup of tea. And then he put me in a jeep and said, just go with this guy. They dropped me. At that time, it wasn't the dam site yet. It was more at the beginning of the road, so it was a much longer walk. And they just told me to walk until I came to Babaji. And I was walking up this. It was hours and hours walking, all alone. I had my big backpack on. I didn't have a porter. I didn't know anything about anything. I arrived in India yesterday afternoon, and here I was walking through the jungle. And in my mind, I'm going, yeah, I like Idris Shah. I remember all the Sufi stories. Man, I'm going to meet this guy, but he lives far away. I mean, I'll meet this guy. Maybe I'll go and see Rajneesh because he was really popular then. And all these stories going through my head. And I got to Haidakhan. I walked up the stairs. And Babaji was standing at the top of the stairs when I got there. And he was in brilliant crimson red silk. And I got to the top of the stairs and there he was standing and I was dumbfounded. And I started shaking and I didn't know what to do. And I went up and I took his hand in both of my hands and I was shaking his hand going, I'm so happy to be here. And he raised his hand and he knocked me down onto the ground. And he said, I told you to come here. What took you so long? And it put the whole thing together for me. And then he said, you're my special guest. Shave your head. Go in the cave. And then Mansingh and Moti Bhagwan walked me down to the river. Moti Bhagwan shaved my head. And Mansingh took me and put me in the cave. That's how I met Baba.
I can go on and on and tell you everything. It's amazing.
So Baba reappeared in 1970 at that time.
At the time, I don't think they're filming now, but actually at the time that I met this man, who later I found out that was Srinivas Maharaj I met. It was almost exactly 1 year after he died.
He appeared to me in California. And I realized that when the first time I went to Babaji sitting on his asana, and there was the painting of Srinivas Maharaj right beside him. And Babaji just looked at me and nodded. Just like, wow. And I had a son. And I said, Babaji, I have a son. He said, I didn't give you permission to have a son. That's a big responsibility. And then he had sent me to get a picture of my son and give him a picture of my son. And he put it with some seeds and stuff. He put it in a little plastic bag and then he put it in a little plastic folder and he held it in his hand for a while and he gave it to me. He said, keep this with you always and I'll protect always your son. And then there was a whole teaching around that moment. And on the third day I was there, Muniraji came Babaji took Muniraji and I, and we walked up the riverbed beyond where the governor's house now is. Of course, it wasn't there then. And he told Muniraji and I to have our bath, and after we had our bath, we gave Babaji his bath. And Babaji gave me my janeel, and he said to me, Muniraji is your guru. In your past life, you lived with Muniraji. He called you here, and he's giving you to me, and one day I'll give you back. And I had to serve Muniraji, or I began to serve Muniraji from that very beginning.
So I think for all of us, there's many deep experiences. As Karku's sharing some of his, does something come up for either of you that you want to share? Maybe around when you first met Babaji, how that was for you, what it was like.
After that experience of seeing that photograph, which so pierced my heart, really. From that moment forward, I started having a lot of experiences, and some of them were in a meditative state, some of them were in a dream state, but basically the teaching relationship with Babaji began from that moment forward. And many of the dreams were lucid dreams, absolutely lucid dreams, and so the sense of already being in the student-teacher relationship had begun, and it was fantastic because I felt I was being carried in a current on my way to India. So I was still finishing that year, and then the summer, and then I started traveling in the fall, and arrived in India in December. And I heard that he was arriving from Calcutta. He wasn't in Haidakhan when I arrived in Delhi. And so a small group of us, I think it was 4 people, went to the airport for his arrival. And Indian airports, and the Delhi airport at that time, this was December 18th, 1982. And we're all anxious and waiting, and the airport is full. And I see out of the window this man that appears to be Babaji, and he's decked out to the max. He has this paunch, and he has these silk flowing robes, and this incredible turban, and it's colorful beyond. And I'm watching, and I start doubting that it's the same person, the same teacher that I've been for all these months developing this relationship with, because he just looks physically so different, and the garb is different, and he looks physically different. And I start doubting, and I had brought a friend with me, so I really was about to start verbalizing my doubts as he entered the actual airport, and I'm on my tippy toes, and I'm looking and trying to continue to connect. And right as I'm about to tell my friend, I think I made a mistake, I think this is not the same teacher, the ocean of people sort of parts enough, and so that as Babaji's walking that way, he turns his head and looks at me with those eyes that all of us know so well, and just absolutely pierces me to the core. And then I was like, no, yep, that's the same one, that's it, unmistakable. And that was the only moment of doubt that I had, was that gap. And from that moment, it was whatever the manifestation was on the outer form, I knew who was there, and the relationship. That was really important, because as we were, as many memories come, sometimes the form was very animated, sometimes the form was very less accessible, you can say, very inward. He was very in deep states himself, and sometimes very accessible to all of us. But because of that experience, I always was able, or mostly was able, to anchor in that, in the essence. And especially if I could catch his eyes. And then it was very stable for me for that. There are many stories, and I'll share more, but I think maybe I'll pass right now. Maybe you all can share.
My story is a lot less romantic than these. Yeah, I had quite a rebellistic nature, and I was also not particularly strongly
Of what nature?
rebel.
Oh, you're rebellious. Yeah,
Rebellious.
Sorry.
Rebellious.
I was just trying to.
And I was also not seriously on a spiritual quest. I was somehow tickled by something, but I didn't know how to go to it because I had a lot of refusal to Hinduism with all monkey and elephant gods and these things. I thought I was judging it from far. But this story somehow of this superhuman who could control snakes, and that somehow was tickling, so I thought, let's go and have a look. And I went in one day from Delhi to Haldwani, and I arrived, it was in June, it was hot. And as soon as I stepped out of the bus, there was a rickshaw who said to me, Haidakhan? I said, oh, you know this place, okay. And I stepped into a rickshaw in Haldwani, which took forever to arrive at the dam site. And there he said, this is Haidakhan. I said, but where's Babaji? Where is the ashram? He said, oh, the road cannot go. And I didn't trust the situation very much. But then the villager came by and he said, villager of Raghuveer, which most of us also know, I think. And he brought me, he said, no, I will bring you, don't worry. 10 rupees. I had to bargain it down to 8, but he walked me all the way to Haidakhan carrying my luggage. And then I started to wonder if he was going to mug me because through the river and... but he was actually a nice guy, so I don't know where we were going. And then we were coming close to Haidakhan, and then Babaji was walking towards me. I didn't know it was Babaji, but the porter told me, this is Babaji, here is your luggage, I'm going. He was a bit afraid of Babaji. And then I walked up to Babaji, who was Thomas, Hargowin's brother, was walking next to him with an umbrella for the sun, and Baba was dressed in silk, and it was not at all looking like a picture. I mean, these pictures was all of 1970, 72, 73, and there he was a little bit more bulgy and a silk dress instead of this pristine white, but I didn't care so much of it. I thought, oh, nice to meet him immediately, because it was all the way at the Satikund where... But I didn't know how to address to a guru, so I just did like this, and I said hello and namaste. And he looked at me with a face, and he said, in Hindi, he said, where do you come from? I said, Thomas translated, I said, oh, I come from Haldwani. No, where do you come from? Said, oh, I'm from Holland. No, where do you come from? And then I was, Delhi? And then he said, Gufa, you go Gufa. But the thing what happened, until that moment, I'd been already before in India, I had become pretty tough. Indians always want your money, your attention, your this, your that, and I was bargaining every price of a rickshaw, whatever, usually cheaper than anybody else. So I was ready to meet somebody head on, so to say. But here, well, I was passing Babaji, I had, without realizing and interacting with him, I had become this small. But I couldn't even translate it for myself. I said, what happened just now? And, he sent me to the Gufa, and somebody brought me there, and I was... How long this story doesn't end, really.
You never do.
Anyway, I went through a whole thing where I saw some woman carrying a heavy bucket of water, so I said, give that to me. I put my rucksack down, and somebody else came and took it from me. I said, oh, okay. And as I turned down to go back to my rucksack, there was again the same woman with a bucket. And I thought, what's going on here? And all of a sudden I was in a line of watering the garden. Okay, I'll give a hand then. And I was looking in the distance as I could see Babaji somewhere around the Satikun taking a bath, and I was all the time looking at him, but you can't see anything when you're at the gufa, or you just see some shining clothes there. And the guy next to me said, you're already mesmerized, eh? Oh, I didn't want that because I didn't really like him. He was not friendly at all, and he didn't look like the guy I voted for in the beginning. So I got a little bit in my way, and at a certain point, people said later there's Aarti. What's Aarti? Well, you have to go there. So I went to the other side and stood in the middle of everybody in the dark. It was just getting dark in the Kirtan hall, and I thought, what's everybody milling here, waiting? All of a sudden, everybody started to ring these bells. I was totally shocked. What the hell is going on here? And then these doors of the temple opened, and I saw Babaji. First I saw that somebody doing something with fire, so I was trying to understand what was going on there, and then he turned around with his fire in his hand, and I couldn't see it very well because before there was electric light there. And I thought it was Babaji. It was Gohari, but I didn't have long enough to look at him, and with all these things in the dark, hey, what's he doing with that fire there? And but I just went through the whole thing, and sitting down between everybody singing this language I didn't understand, and looking around at all these shaven heads, and I had no feeling or nothing about that. And all of a sudden everybody got up and started to walk. Said, where are you going? I said, you come. So we all stood up. Babaji was also summer, so Babaji was sitting outside on these two benches in front of the Hanumans there. But I didn't know that. I was just standing in line, and it was going extremely slow. So by the time we were just passing the Hanuman, I was just thinking, why is it taking so long? And I started to look, and I saw that I was in a line towards Babaji's feet, and people were kissing in his feet. I thought, oh, wait a minute here. And I immediately got out of line and started to look at the situation. What's going on for a wild story here? No, wait a minute. And I just kept on standing in the corner watching all this, and I thought, everybody's nuts here. But I went through the process. The next morning, Prem Baba kicked me out. I was sleeping in front of the gufa outside, and Prem Baba kicked me out of my sleeping bag. He said, it's time for Aarti, you have to wash. Wash? This time? It was already late, but so I just washed myself a little bit, and I went to look around, but I thought, oh, the same song as yesterday, the same story, no. And I started to move on my own. I started to do other things, and but sometimes I would participate, or somebody who looks friendly, I would ask some stories, and I thought everybody was really very weird. And I did nothing really. I just spent my time in the riverbed, suntan lotion, and reading books which were very appealing to me after I had this spiritual awakening about mind reading and astral travel. And I thought, oh, that's what I want to learn. It's just waking up to something. Can I go on? Because it doesn't stop really.